The Sporlan division of Parker Hannifin proudly sponsors the Advanced Refrigeration Podcast. Contaminants like water, acids, sludges, and varnishes may react with compressor windings, leading to compressor burnout or cause copper plating, which reduces bearing clearances, or poor valve seating, eventually causing failure. Or they can deposit in the expansion device, restricting flow or proper modulation of thermostatic expansion valves. Loss of superheat control will lead to lack of cooling if the evaporator is starved, or even worse, flooding of liquid back to the compressor, causing bearing washout and eventual compressor failure. Installing a properly sized, high-quality, time-proven Sporlan catch-all will ensure contaminants are captured before they can harm the new system components. Ask your local refrigeration wholesaler about the Sporlan catch-all filters. Parker Sporlan, leading the charge.
I have. What do you mean you can tell?
Fucking worse than my kid.
I am focused. Super focused.
Fucking focus my ass.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Advanced Refrigeration Podcast. You're with your host, Brett Wetzel and Kevin Compass. I haven't even talked to you this week, barely.
Oh,
what are you working on?
It's been chaos and cases not showing up, and it's just, yeah. It's just been utter chaos. So I've been running around like a chick with my head cut off, trying to get all these cases started up and then trying to get controls cut over and get everything programmed for another MT startup or switch over I have that I start next week that I thought I was like 80% done with. Like 2 months ago when I programmed it, when it got shelved, and yeah, I'm a lot farther behind than I thought. And so I worked on it until 7:00 last night, and then I've been working on it since I got home this morning, or since I got home this afternoon. And then earlier I did a ES1 upgrade on a rack.
How'd that go?
So,
A little bit.
this is always just super hectic, and this one had a bunch of 1081s on it. It was just a lot of work. Like, it's just moving stuff around, and I'm pretty anal about it. They want you to cut the comm lines, like to make things a daisy chain now, so it's a real pain in the ass, to be honest with you. And there's no good real place to mount it. This is a Sam's rack, so it's pretty long. Is the
So
rack
in the mechanical room then, or are you doing?
Well, they wanted it on the rack. Unfortunately, there was two Slopus controllers that got converted to an ES1.
Okay.
So all the comms had to get brought over. So what I ended up doing is I ended up putting a terminal block in the middle of the rack where it was away from everything, and I intercepted everything on terminal blocks and then just brought everything in. But it's just a lot of tedious little work.
So we're fine.
Yeah, for some reason I couldn't get my laptop to hook up to it. I could not get it. I could not get Java
I'm
web.
really sarcastic, but it sounds uberly fun.
It was not fun. I was getting really irritated that I couldn't get the Java web thing to load for the ES1 because it makes it a nightmare without a computer to do those swaps, because a lot of times the comm drawings are wrong. And then you're playing guess and check with the comm lines. So of just plugging them in and see what comes online. It's a lot easier if you could get on the laptop and you could see what COM port is actually, Spectrum, what COM port is BACnet, what COM port is this BACnet. It's a lot. It makes it a lot easier doing those. But for some reason, I could not get Java Web Launch to launch this one.
Isn't there a document that actually shows that the COM port is usually blah COM port? Like COM port 1 is always for the rack shit, right, on the Spectrum. COM port 2 is typically always the CCM, right? And COM port 3.
No, this was Opus stuff. Yeah. this was already Opus to begin with. There was SC3 loops, so there's all kinds of stuff going on here. So it was a pain. So that was my morning, and then I went to our shit show island changeouts where cases keep showing up wrong, and yeah. So hopefully at some point we'll be done with these island jobs and my life will be a whole lot easier. But
Yeah.
if they keep showing up wrong, I'm assuming not.
So we recorded, I think, Tuesday, and I was supposed to come home on Wednesday last week, and that didn't happen. I was supposed to catch a flight like 2:48 in the afternoon. I was at Palm Springs, and my flight was delayed, of course, and then broken plane. So then I had to basically then my flight got canceled, and it's a small airport, so there's nothing I could do for anything. And basically, I ended up having to get a ride for 2 hours with a stranger out to LAX, and then got a hotel for the night, and then flew out the next morning at 6 a.m., which means I had to be at the airport at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. So that was just awfully fun. But towards the end of the week, I got to play around with, have you ever heard of this DST thing?
I have seen vague things on it. I have never actually messed around with it, though.
So the rep flew out. We checked out a store the other day on Friday. He came up from, I forget where he lives. I think somewhere in Ohio, but he came down and showed me this tool, and I got to play around with it. And I told him, I'm like 3/4 of the way sold, because there was no verification, right? So you basically use this it basically does a scan auditory wise, but using AI, and will spit out like what's potentially wrong with the compressor. You can hear like we did something across filter dryers, and you could tell the filter dryers that were just recently changed because there's barely any noise, but you could hear the turbulence within the filter dryers that sounded like they were blocked. And the same thing with an oil pump that looks like, it sounded like it was, as far as the DST tool, that sounded like the pickup screen at the bottom was blocked. And there was 2 compressors running side by side, and it also can pick up if it has either electrical wear or the valve plate is actually worn. And I haven't went back for the verification yet, because I'm like 90% like on the fence right now, where I'm just like, I really think this is going to work. But what I want to do is I want to go back and do some verification, and go back to the store and be like, hey, let's pull apart the valve plate. Let's do this. And I'm just curious. I'm actually talking to the guy. We're going to probably have him on soon. I don't know when. I probably after I want to do the verification and make sure that everything's square away. But I'm like pretty sure it's pretty damn cool. We're going to see what happens.
It's pretty cool. No.
Well,
I want some free tools.
Get out of here. No, one of the things is, because you're having to take samples, right? So if you're taking a sample off of 3D, that's fairly cut and dry, because you take a measurement below the valve plate. Okay, sorry. 3D, you check the suction bearing, then you check the mid part of the compressor, then you check where the oil pump is, and then you check below the valve plate and above the valve plate. And that's where you're actually taking all the readings. So on a 4D, it'd be a little bit different, where you're checking below and above, always on the suction side of this thing. But like I said, I'm gonna have the guy on once I do the verification, going back and seeing like what we actually found, to see if it is valid. Because I'm still like, I don't know. But from all the other stuff that I've talked to some of the other guys that have used it, they're like, they've had their aha moment. I'm waiting for my aha moment. So other than that, I've been at home this week, and that's really it. We were discussing what we were going to do. I had to do some sizing this week for some pipes. I was going to do some CO2 pipe sizing, if you're down for it.
Let's do it.
All right. Sounds good. Step. Why does Adobe take up so much memory?
Adobe's ass.
I like Adobe. Like I can do a lot of cool stuff with it, but it takes up so much memory.
Yeah, they're literally just screwing everybody. They made a couple good pieces of software, and they're literally just screwing everybody with their ridiculous license fees, that you can't just buy the software anymore, and you got to buy a license fee every year.
What are you talking about? Really?
Yeah. Adobe's awful.
Never anything positive. Never.
It's positive. Adobe's one of those software companies out there just raping everybody.
It's absolutely just fucking wretched. So I was given some guidelines just to start off. I was given some guidelines as far as what suction pipe velocities, because that's what they really, besides the amount of BTUs, they also size off of BTUs, but also velocities, because obviously if we're in suction lines, we got to be able to carry the oil back. On top of sloping, we got to be able to make sure that we're carrying that oil back. So if you're using rule of thumb, it's usually like at about 200 feet per minute, at the saturation that you're trying to pull it back. Suction lines are anywhere from 900 to 2,000 feet per minute. And I had to get this converted because everything was in MS. I forget what meters per second, I think is what it originally was in. And then suction risers need to be anywhere from about 1,500 to about 2,500 feet per minute. And that's so we can carry the oil back up. And then discharge lines are anywhere from 1,900 to about 3,000. So we're just going to go through some of the systems and see where approximately they think that they should be running. So here, I can send you this software, Kevin. So this is line size something. Unfortunately, it doesn't get any bigger than, but just to explain the software, I already have it set up for CO2. But what you can do is when you go to edit tube database, has a couple things in here. And you actually have to go through and it gives you all the inside dimensions of it with the wall thickness, because you have to have this set up. Otherwise, it's not just based off the outside. It's actually based on the inside diameter. Excuse me. So you can do standard, non-standard copper tubing, hard drawn, soft drawn, XHP. I had to edit this because originally it said standard piping. And so I had a store recently that I was out at that it was XHP. And because it has a smaller diameter because of the thickness of the wall, the copper, we had to essentially do this. So if we're doing on this particular store, this was just a regular hard drawn store. So that's where you would set that up. So we already see that we're at R744. This is where we're going to put in our BTUs of whatever the case is. So example, I don't know, let's do AO4 here, 9 doors of ice cream. And the load is 9.87 MBH.
You're not showing anything.
Why do I do that all the time? Sorry. You should have told me that sooner. So anyway, so back to this. So there's the tube database, standard, non-standard, blah, 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 blah. And then this is the one we had to actually edit the XHP copper, like to put the actual diameters in there. Okay. Steel pipe, rubber hoses, blah. So then what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we're at 744. We're going to do the cooling duty, which is basically the MBH. We can change this. So if it's not MBH, you can change it to watt, kilowatt, MBH or BTU per hour, and then kcal per hour. I don't know what kcal is. I have no idea. But most of the refrigeration schedules are in MBH. Then what we're going to do is we're going to set whatever the ST is of the system. In this instance, if we're going to do that AO4. So this is where we're going to put our MBH 9.87. And then our saturated at that point is going to be -13. This is where it gets hokey because there's typically no EPRs in CO2. Typically, it can be done, but it's not really done a lot. So the condensing is where you're going to put whatever your flash tank is going to be.
Don't say that. I'm getting ready to redo an entire job with EPRs.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Wait, you're putting them in?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank God.
Because it's causing a whole bunch of shit.
Yeah, it runs like hammered dog shit without them.
Yeah. Back to this 9.7. So we'll do it for -13. Condensing temperature, like I said, it's going to be
your flash tank.
Yeah, it's going to be your flash tank. So typically, I forget what
33,
this one.
33 usually is a pretty common number.
Yeah. So that's probably what this one's set for. This is a 0 zone rack. Put that there. The amount of superheat that you're actually going to have on this case. So typically, I think all the case controller manufacturers like 8. That's a safe spot. So you're going to put it for that. And then the other thing that you have to do is calculate the actual line run, which I'm not really sure if this schedule actually shows it. It should. Blah, 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 blah.
Generally, most OEM schedules like that do not have it on there.
Damn it, it doesn't. Okay.
So say 400 feet. Say 400 feet.
400.
Was it a loop or is it circuit piped?
Loop.
No.
40?
Say
40 feet.
40 feet.
Okay. So this is where we put all the stuff in here for our tube length. 40 for our liquid, 40 for our suction. We
Need to go back to circuit pipe racks. So much better. So much better.
But it's more copper.
It's more copper, but it's easily serviceable and everything's in the mechanical room.
Very true. You're not up in the ceiling playing around with shit.
Mm-hmm.
So then we hit solve. And so this will give you where it thinks that the piping should be.
1/4 inch.
For the liquid line?
Yeah.
If we go, what are you thinking? Because if we go bigger.
Most specs I've ever seen is minimum 3/8.
No, and I get it, but what it's going to do is going to mess up the velocity. I also down here, this is something I didn't go over. So I have a standard of about, because you can put in as many pieces in here as you want, but I put basically 2 TP straight throughs for the liquid line for your drops. And then I put about 4 long radius on both liquid and suction. So
you know how miserable it is just supporting 3/8 pipe in the air?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
Like 1/4 inch would be impossible almost.
Well, you know what else? I hold on. Actually,
You're looking like a banana in the ceiling.
I get it. Actually, I messed up because I think I'm still on. Oh no, I'm not. I'm on hard drawn. Never mind. I thought I was on XHP for a minute until I looked down here. But anyway, so yeah, so it's saying 3/8 for the suction line and 1/4 inch for the liquid line.
It's 9,000 BTUs. It's a baby case.
Yeah, I know. All right, let's do a bigger case then.
Yeah, most customer specs I've seen is nothing smaller than 3/8.
I get it, but the velocity's not there then. So if you and I don't know, unfortunately, I don't know the negative effects of it's up to 200. So we're still there. So you could basically do that. And I don't know the negative effects of going too slow. So if you were to step this up all the way up to, I don't know when it's going to go red. Usually it goes red and yells at me. But it's how much pressure drop that you're going to have in that pipe. So
well, yeah, the least amount of pressure drop, the better for liquid lines at least.
Yeah, so even if we're going to go 3/8, we still have 48 feet per minute. Now on the suction line versus what I was told here, whatever the fuck list suction lines are able to be anywhere from 900 to 200, 2000, 900 to 2,000 feet per minute. So we're in the spec. So that case would be there. All right, so let's do the bigger one. Let's do
1/4 inch K copper. God, imagine trying to keep that straight.
I'm just saying.
It would look like a bunch of bananas in the ceiling. You have hangers every 3 foot and it'd still be sagging.
30.9. How about we just do the ice cream freezer, you asshole? -19.
Make the piping length longer too. That's another thing that's going to help us out. 40 foot is not very much pipe.
Honestly, it really doesn't do much. Like here, just to show you. So it's showing for this case for 30,000 or 30.9 MBH. It's showing that a 1/2 inch suction line will do us right and a 3/8 liquid line will do us right. So even if you let's add 50 and you'll see what happens to the velocities. Nah, dude. It really didn't do anything.
Oh yeah, another 10 feet ain't gonna do much. No, it's
Let's do 100. So it was 1951 and 152, just for reference. I already forgot those numbers. 1952. So the velocity went down, or it went up. 1952 because it went down.
Went down.
Yeah, but it's still within tolerance. So
yeah, but it went up. It went from 1/2 inch to 5/8.
It did, and we can still we can go. Yeah, if you go 1/2 inch, look what it actually. The application will actually show you how much pressure drop that you'll actually get. It's funny. It's funny that we're doing this today. So your other brother called me this morning talking about a job that he's on, and basically he was complaining about about a case that he was having issues with, and we were running it through the app this morning, and sure as shit, it was undersized, and it was about it was almost exactly what it called for, like how much pressure drop he was seeing there. He had a 37 psi pressure drop on the case. 37 psi, it's usually what, 7 degrees, or I'm sorry, 1 degree for every 7 pounds of pressure drop. So it was like 5 degrees above saturated, what the fuck it was calling for.
Yeah, no, this is an overlooked thing. People don't really understand this. And with CO2, it seems to be harder. Just the fact that there's not a lot of basic line sizing calculators out there like there is for DX stuff. Like there's a lot of basic line sizing calculators for DX, like the Sporlan NST app, or the one that's in that, not the online one, the desktop version that they don't make anymore, is an awesome line sizing calculator.
Oh, the Sporlan one?
Yeah. That's what I use for like DX stuff.
Someone said that there was a Sporlan CO2 line sizing thing, but I don't know. And I think
I've yet to see it if there is.
Dylan was saying that he was using Cool Selector to try to figure this out, but he's like, he was using that own app, and I was like, I've never used that for this, and I literally just learned how to use this within the past week because I had to do some line sizing for something, and I was like, fuck, I can figure that out now.
No, I do a decent amount of sizing lines in stores because we do a lot of remodels that aren't engineered. I do a decent amount of line sizing, just knowing your velocity should be, and just making sure, like, the rules of thumb is if you're under velocity, if your length is, if you have to go up a pipe size because your length and you're still slightly under velocity, on size your risers.
Yeah, you're not, because you're not going to get that oil. You're not going to get that oil. Technically, you shouldn't really ever have oil in the cases because the coalescing oil separator should never, ever fail.
Yep.
Today's episode is sponsored by the RefraShield RDP Series differential pressure monitors from Westermeyer Industries, now available for transcritical CO2 systems in addition to other common pressures and refrigerants. When the filter element of your coalescing oil separator is contaminated, it can hurt your system's performance and efficiency. But how do you know when it's time to replace that filter? Wait too long to replace, and you could end up with a nasty filter blowout. But replacing too often can be a waste of time and money. The answer is installing a differential pressure monitor. The RDP Series differential pressure monitors, including the new transcritical CO2 model, are available now from Westermeyer Industries. To find out more information, email sales@westermeyerin.com. That's WESTERMEYERIN.com.
But I know I'm still living in theory land. But if Westmeyer centrifugals. No, but that's if the oil separator were to fail, where the coalescing element basically blows out, then you're going to have all this oil out in the system, and then it's not going to freaking travel back because it doesn't have that velocity kicking out. But yeah.
So you're going to have the magic oil that never leaves the compressor or the rack, except for when it does.
Did it lose it?
Oh, yeah. All the time.
Does it really?
All the time.
Oh, that's wretched.
Tell it to the evaporator I cut into the other day that was full oil.
Come on.
Oh, yeah.
Did you just start breaking out in hives?
Yeah, my hands did. Hell with that PAG oil. I want nothing to do with that shit.
Where's your Viper gloves?
I refuse to touch that stuff. Yeah. Never go to supply house, so I don't ever get gloves.
All right, let's do
another. Get a hazmat suit for that shit.
Jesus, tap dancing. All right, let's do one more system. God damn it. All right, let's do the medium temp circuit. We're at 26 degrees saturated. See, this is what's fucked up because this is a CO2 rack. And then I know that the CO2 rack does not have any EPRs on it. So this is what's kind of...
This is why they're always wrong. And this is why all the pulse valves come out wrong. And then you get the liquid hammer extreme because you got Hussman over here saying they need a plus 28 coil. You got Kaiser Warren over here saying they need a plus 26. You got Hill Phoenix saying they need a plus 18 for some random case. And then the whole rack is sized for plus 18. And then the whole rack is running plus 18. And then nothing else is getting plus 18. And the pressure drops almost double. And then next thing, like every valve is like 2 sizes too big. And in 6 seconds, it just gives you nothing but full flood. Seen it 100 times.
All right, let's do a medium temp system. All right, let's pick something that has a fairly large BTU on there. Look, there's no. Oh, wait a minute. What's this? MT loop plus.
Also, can we make a normal lineup like 12-foot dairy, 8-foot dairy? Do we really need that many systems? Can we just make it all? Can we make it like a 36-foot case of a lineup? Like, why did we start breaking everything into just 70 different systems? It's ridiculous. Look at it.
I'm looking at.
What?
I think what the thought is, okay, and hear me out. Don't start yelling at me yet. But think about it. You're also going to be the one bitching when they put 25% of the fucking load in defrost and everything tanks.
Yeah, but at the same time, I bet you half those cases don't have dividers in between them because everybody stopped doing that because all the merchandising people started freaking out about the dividers. So then they are in defrost at the same time.
I'm living in my perfect world right now. That's all. All right. So let's do the storage. 25-degree SST. Or no, actually, hold on. Yeah, 25 or 23? No, it'd be 25. Yeah. 25-degree SST. That's the other thing. Let's look at that real quick. Okay, sorry. 25, you had me laughing so hard. I fucked up the condensing. Condensing at 30. Superheat 8 degrees, subcooling. Just so you know, the subcooling is based off of if the unit has like a heat exchanger or not. Because typically, from what I was informed, and I've never tested this, but you'll get about 3 degrees of subcooling. I'm going to test that next time because I've never checked it. But you want to do 100 feet or you want to do 50?
Do 100 feet.
Okay.
Send it.
All right. I don't have to worry about discharge lengths and solve. For this line up, you can go 1/2 inch. So 1/2 inch for the suction line and 3/8 for the liquid line. And then if, let's see. Yeah, this is what I wanted to check though. So the suction is going to be running at 20 degrees, right? So real quick, I'm going to take a screenshot of this because I'm going to forget the numbers because that happened so so quickly. So this is what it was when it was actually running a 25-degree SST, right? Or what's called for, but there's no way because there's no EPR, right? So let's put it to where the rack's going to be running. It's probably 18 degrees, right?
So it's going to mess it all up.
It's not horrible. Like the liquid velocity didn't change.
Suction velocity did though.
A little bit, not horrible. It actually increased the velocity. So that's not horrible. If anything, that's actually better for oil return. But back to your point, it's going to fuck up the expansion valve sizing.
Did it take into account the compressor cycle Master 5000 running at a plus 18 when all the valves are like 2% open? That's real world.
That's why you're such a good startup technician, Kevin.
I can't solve customer set points.
You can't tweak the rack from there, no?
How are you supposed to tweak the rack up 10 degrees?
Very careful tuning on the VFD.
You know what? They should make that one case that's plus 18. Why don't you be like everybody else and be plus 25?
Or put it on
a single unit.
Yeah.
For the 12 foot.
Put it on the low temp. Put it on the low temp and put it on the EPR.
Yeah. Yeah. Like why would you size an entire rack? Yeah.
I understand what you're going to say about that, but what my point is just put that low temp, because that's what Target does. They'll on their HFC racks, they'll put that medium temp meat box on the fucking low temp, and it has an EPR in there. Sometimes it's not programmed right, or it just opens up to Jesus. But my point is being that you could basically put in an EPR just for that one circuit and then float the whole rack up 4 or 5 degrees.
That's how it should be. Like
I agree with you. I'm not arguing.
When you're running 1 or 2 cases, 1 or 2 lineups at plus 18, and you're running the rest of the whole store at plus 28 or plus 18 or plus 20 something, that's insane. You're literally sacrificing the entire store for 2 cases when just put it on the low temp or do something else with it.
No, I agree. I'm agreeing with you.
It's even worse when you when you put the meat cooler on there and then you run it at like plus 32 or plus 33.
It works wonderfully, doesn't it?
You don't need a plus 18
for the meat box.
No,
you could just jack. I guess you could just jack down the superheat.
Yeah.
If you lower the superheat, you would get essentially a lower TD, and then with everything just cycling off and on that runs dog superheat anyway, just off and on, you get more mass flow back to the compressors and have nice coolie compressors.
I'm never gonna like pulse valves.
I'm not a fan either.
They just don't. You do not get the performance you do out of a stepper.
I totally agree. Now, do you want to talk about your experience of what you did recently with changing some of the shit around on that?
So we found that on big coils.
Let me put this away.
We found that on big coils, me and you were both messing around with this. A longer pulse rate is better. Going from 6 seconds, we've tried 8 and 10. Didn't go above 10, but 8 and 6 or 8 and 10 seem to be like a sweet spot for bigger coils. But the other is true for smaller coils, shorter pulse rates.
Smaller.
But again, I'm not telling you to go do this because we were testing this and I don't know what that's going to do to the triac inside those. But I'll tell you right now, a 4-foot Hussmann coil in a case with a slightly oversized valve on a 6-second pulse rate is horrendous. Same thing if it's the small KW coil. If it's a 4-foot coil and you have a slightly oversized orifice in there, you're done for. A 6-second pulse rate the pulse rate of the controller, I don't care, all the tuning in the world's not going to fix that.
So the way this got brought up, we were talking about a job that Kevin was on, and we were discussing because most of the bigger coils, you'll have 2 different types of coils on a CO2 store, right? You'll have one that has basically one pass in, one pass out, which is most of like your Hill Phoenix ice cream cases and all your medium have cases. Same thing with KW cases and whatever else. They're usually just a pass through where it's one line in, one line out. And then you get to some of the bigger shit where it has a distributor. And we were discussing how typically what you're supposed to have is you're supposed to have a full column of liquid in between the expansion valve and the nozzle. And if you have a real small pulse rate, I'm thinking it's literally just going to pulse a little bit of refrigerant in there and drop down the bottom, because if you have a valve not feeding a regular, and I'm not even talking about CO2 at this point, if you have a regular standard HFC expansion valve and you have that thing throttled down, the refrigerant wants to go path of least resistance. It'll go out and right down the bottom, and you'll have where it'll fake out the case controller and showing that it's actually running low superheat because all the refrigerant's basically dropping down the bottom, even though the top of the coil is not getting any refrigerant whatsoever. The same theory we were talking about, I was like, what would happen if we would do a 10-second pulse? Then basically it's going to load up that nozzle a little bit better. You get a better distribution of refrigerant. That was our theory. And you're telling me that it actually worked.
Yeah, it made it better. It wasn't great, but it was better than a 6-second. To be honest, the store needs EPRs.
Yeah.
Because it has shit suction control.
Yeah.
But I will agree. I think on pulse valves, on smaller cases, they either need to derate the valve. If it's a small coil, slightly undersize it. I would much rather at this point have a slightly undersized pulse valve for smaller coils than I would anything else, because they just don't get the performance out of them. It's just it's too quick. The in and out coils, a 6-second pulse rate to me is too quick. In 2 seconds flat, you watch those things flood out.
I don't know. I was wondering how that was going to all hash out.
Yeah, I switched it back just for the fact that I didn't want to leave it like that. Mm-hmm. But looking at the graphs, they looked pretty decent.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to look a lot more decent after we do some EPRs.
Let me ask you a question. So that store was all the one that you're referring to, and I'm not going to give names, but there's CC200, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you do have the capability of utilizing the same pressure transducer for the superheat as you do for the EPR control, right? And you can
all
actually
you literally have to do is land it on the A case, and it'll take over everything. You can run it off of saturation, just like the SC3s, or you can run it off of pressure. So you could do floating saturation, and then the thing you need the most is it gets the ramp down, like pull down percentage in there, which will help out tremendously. But the EPRs needs to be more of a commonplace. The performance difference between having EPRs and not having EPRs is insane. Let the valves control superheat, let everything calm down, let the EPRs control temp and pressure. It's just so much more consistent on the rack and keeping the velocity up and keeping everything constant. It's insane.
I never understood why, and I understand it as part of the E2 programming, but I never understood why, because it's more stuff, like it's more things that you'd have to fucking put in, like for a regular standard circuit, like the EPR would throttle based off of the temperature, but for the price of a pressure transducer and how much better like energy return that I think that you would actually gain, that if an EPR was able to actually close off and hold a more steady flow, I think the ROI would be just paid for.
I'm not a fan of using electronic EPRs for like air temp control. Like I think using them as pressure saturation is a lot better, because how many times you come to one, it's 100% open. You got one case is super cold, one case is super warm. You got it's all the way open. Now you got a case iced up. The one case is was working is iced up. The case that's run like shit is not iced up. I would much,
or it's iced up just in the back, like wherever the distributor tubes are feeding, right?
Yeah, I would much rather see it more commonplace for like the circuit application, just writing a circuit application to be able to control off saturation pressure or off of pressure and control saturation, and then float the pressure set point based on your discharge air temp.
Or you run the rack, right? Because
you float the case on the rack, but like what if you have a plus 28 SST case on a plus 22 rack? Like you're not going to float off that. You want to float the set point on that plus 28 case up.
No, I get it. I'm just saying, then just still float it, because all that's going to do then is just the EPR. Then if the EPR is strictly just floating off of the pressure, that EPR essentially that's controlling whatever the rack is going to probably be 100% open anyway. So as long as it's fucking holding temperature, the rack and essentially would just be still floating up.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of letting the EPR close a little bit on a floating circuit.
Yeah,
I don't like assigning them the float. If I do floating, I never assign to the float circuit. I always make a fake circuit.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you,
because if something happens and it gets too cold, it never shuts the EPR. So if the suction group freaks out, if something happens to the flow, the compressor sticks on for a minute, if you get nuisance issues, and that's where a lot of guys say they get all these nuisance alarms and nuisance things, I make a fake circuit that way that the floating circuit still has the EPR to back itself up.
What I was going to say is, like, standard, what we typically do is we program the lowest SST within the fake circuit, right? And then also to make sure it keeps floating, you put the next closest SST, or the next closest case that has the next highest SST, or damn it, I don't know how to say this.
Lowest SST.
The next lowest SST up. So if that one's at 18, the one that was your main float, maybe the next one that's running at plus 20, and you put that within the circuit. So if God forbid that unit does, like you said, fail, you're at least floating off another one, or when it goes into a defrost. So it's still continuing to float, even though that other circuit's in a defrost. It might even float a little bit higher at that point.
Yeah, I mean that's the correct way to do it. At that point,
yeah,
needs EPRs and floating suction need to be more common with CO2. A lot of manufacturers still aren't floating suction because they say you can't.
Well, gonna tell you can, but you'd have to float it with your. So there's two. All right, fuck. I thought we were gonna end. Now you got me fucking rolling on this.
Oh no, I get rowdy with it. Like I've seen 40-pound suction floats on medium temp.
So let's get fucking rowdy then. So what you can do is as long as you can still float up your flash tank, right? And we already know that there's a writable point on there that we can actually change on the iPro at least. I don't know about the pack controller, but we could potentially float up the iPro and then just float the suction just to make sure you keep your differential.
You don't even need to keep it that high though. Like it's honestly like if 40 to 50 pounds is generally where you need it to get enough liquid flow and enough oil flow to accomplish things. If you start to dip below that pressure difference and you start derating all the valves, you're going to notice it and it's going to show up in the float.
There's another easier way to do this. You put a mechanical look. They have that regulating valve that LMP uses, right? They have
hate that.
I understand, but hear me out. This is the only reason why I'm talking about it. You're not using it for any flow as far as oil, but what you're doing is use that for the vent off of the suction. So no matter what the fucking suction is, you could basically use it as an inlet pressure regulator to make sure you achieve the 60 pounds that you need for an oil flow.
I would rather see a solenoid and a pressure transducer injecting.
That's more shit.
But it's not mechanical, and it could shut off in an emergency. Like if the rack shuts off, that high deck valve is just sending her on home till the relief blows. It's literally equalizing out the receiver.
But the receiver is typically going to be on the same pressure as your medium.
Not your discharge. If the rack goes down, that high deck valve feeds pressure until the discharge pressure equals receiver pressure.
No, but you're misunderstanding me. You're still having the oil control at the bottom of the bottom.
I get what you're saying. You're using it as an outlet pressure regulator instead of an
essentially an OCV. That's all I'm saying is use the high deck valve that you don't like just as a pressure regulator to act as an OCV. That's all I'm saying. There's no oil flow going through it. The only thing we're using it for is just to make sure we have that 60 pounds above suction so we can force that oil in.
No, that works. That works. 50-pound float is not that scary, though. Everybody thinks it's scary. It's not that scary.
I know it's not, but I'm
not that scary. But you also got to remember, you got to float your delta pressure, like 8-9 pounds. I usually go like a half a degree to a degree. You got to remember, like it's 5-6 pounds, per degree or half a degree sometimes.
Yeah, 7 degrees for every 1 psi.
And I float fast, like 2-3 minutes on medium temp.
Really?
Yeah, because otherwise you're not going to get the performance of the floats. I see floats all the time, like 10-12 minutes. Do you know how long it's going to take to ramp up? By then you already have a case alarm or ramp down. That's where floating gets a bad name. People with slow floats or where people get a bad name. If you have big walk-ins, you can do slow floats are absolutely fine. But if you're using cases, especially open air multi-decks, and you're doing slow floating, you're doing yourself a disservice.
It's been a long day.
It's been a long day.
Gotcha. I was going to call it. I was going to call it before you get all rowdy with the get saucy Kevin tonight. I think it'll call it.
Yep. All right, guys. Thanks for listening.
See you guys. Bye.